So my title, I'm really going to talk about this notion of institutional norms and what institutional norms can do in terms of creating obstacles in the face of invention, and even some stories about how that changed my attitude and my approach to invention and creating new ideas and new things. So one of the first things is this notion of incremental progress. So in industry and even in academia, metrics are set up to reward incremental progress, not necessarily creativity and innovation. In industry, some things like sell so many units of something, or increase the speed of something by 2x, not when you could possibly increase the speed by 10x. So setting metrics that really stifle creativity. Traditional career paths. Dr. McCrary talked about academics versus industry. But what about entrepreneurship? What about starting your own business? It's not something that we actively encourage in the world of entrepreneurship or the world of invention. And finally, limited ambition. This notion that if you stay in these cycles too long, you can really erode your confidence and then really limit the ability for you to take chances and become an entrepreneur or an inventor. I'm going to turn this a little bit this way. Oops. So my innovation journey really can be summed up in this slide. The places I went to school, the places I spent for my career, and some of the inventions I did around visual computing and video characterization. However, it was the transition points between education, career, and invention that really where I faced what I call these institutional norms, these challenges around creating new and innovative things. And I typically tell a lot of stories. I'm going to keep it to one, so I meet my 10-minute line. But one of the biggest challenges in terms of an institutional norm was my transition. I'm an HBCU graduate, North Carolina A&T and Tuskegee. Yeah, thank you. Yes. And that transition from HBCU to Research One institution. Now, I can tell you, when you look at the talent from HBCU to Research One, we're very talented people at both levels. It's really a lot of it comes down to exposure. Do you have access to the same number of courses, the same research labs as some of these places like Stanford and Carnegie Mellon? So in my case, the first graduate course I took at Stanford, I remember it was a semiconductors course, and the professor said, well, about 50% of the people in this class dropped the class. I said, okay, well, that's interesting. So I started asking people, asked the guy next to me, I said, hey, what do you think about this class? Do you think you're going to be okay? He said, well, I took the undergraduate prerequisite, so I think I'll be ready. I think I'll be fine. I said, darn, I didn't have the undergraduate prerequisite in my school, so well, I got to work a little harder than you. The guy to my right, I said, what about you? What do you think? You think you can handle this? He says, well, I used to TA this course, so I think I should be okay. I'm really hoping to just get a better grade than what I got the last time. So a person who took the prerequisite and another person who was the TA. And now all this time I'm watching this, and my roommate, who was a gentleman from China, he was there, and he was up there talking to the professor. They were up at the front of the board, and they're arguing and fighting. I said, he looks really confused. So I said, okay, I got to be able to do at least as well as he does. So I talked to him, at night at dinner, later that night, and I said, hey, so you seemed a little confused at the topics. Is there something I can do to help you? And he said, no, Michael, no, I wasn't confused. I was telling the instructor that the method he was using to explain this was all wrong. And then when I used to teach this course, I taught in a completely different way. So again, institutional norms, people not really taking a course to learn anything new, taking a course to get an A, to advance themselves in something they already knew. And that was really not what it was about for me. You see, for me, my education process started at Tuskegee. So when you ask the question about who was George Washington Carver, I just stayed silent. So this man was probably an influential factor on me choosing Tuskegee, and I didn't even know it, because so much invention at Tuskegee around agriculture and soybean science was generated from Tuskegee, and Tuskegee was known as this place for innovation and this place for research. But I didn't choose Tuskegee to study agriculture. I chose it to study computer science. And so there I am on a high school visit a few years ago, I won't say how long. You can tell. I'm glad the light is so saturated. You can't see the.
We see the computer.
Yeah, well, that's an SGI, Silicon Graphics Workstation, that was my first exposure, and Tuskegee was one of the first places, one of the first HBCUs to have a high-end graphics research lab. So this would start to formulate my way of thinking about research, thinking about invention through unconventional methods. And what would happen after this, I would go on through connections there to do some work at Bell Laboratories. So one of the first places I did an internship at Bell Laboratories was in the Anechoic or Acoustic Research Center. That at the time was the quietest room in the world. And I had great mentors like Jim West, Bill Massey, Gary Elko, that really worked with me along the way. And of course, that handsome gentleman there was also one of my mentors at Bell Labs. So I can't leave Dr. McCrary out. So this sort of helped me think about invention a different way, the challenges of taking courses with groups that were maybe more prepared, and it really made me think about invention and the types of work I would do later very differently. So I was always interested in imaging problems, and perfect, thank you. I can stop yelling. So I was always interested in imaging problems, and I found my niche in a topic called computer vision, really the ability for computers to see and understand the things that they see. So one of the big problems in computer vision is this notion of, if that's an input image, what does a computer think it is? Does it think it's me, Michael Smith, or does it think I'm Fruit, or someone else? And if you were to put that picture into a Google image search, these are some of the results you would get. Because the colors are very similar to, apparently I look like a peach, and apparently I look like these two actors, even though we have very little in common. And it got me to thinking about, well, how do we solve this problem of image matching and image correlation? And I said, well, what about the notion of taking advantage of images and looking at image processing without actually looking at image data? Why don't we look at all the information we have associated with image data and to see how well that solves the problem? So I had this notion of this idea of contextual metadata or contextual imaging. And the basic idea is, if you take images in a database and you separate them into different categories about the data you know about the images. So images taken on a weekday versus a weekend, images taken at night versus during the day, can that give you a better idea, a better concept around matching images? Because, there's some students in here. I would argue that most of you don't have pictures with your professors on the weekend. So we can strike them off right there, right? So I said, let's see what happens if we combine this with classic imaging data like color. So at the time, for face analysis, image recognition alone, to get a result of about 43% was considered pretty good. It was considered quite good, actually. So I said, well, let's see what happens if we just look at the data, not even look at the image. And I almost hit the floor. 50% accuracy on facial recognition without even looking at who's in the picture. Just looking at when the picture was taken, time of day of week, etc. I said, okay, that's a little disappointing. I've been working on this for 20-some years, but, in a couple of weeks, I do 7% better. But let's see where this takes us. We combine the results, and we get 60% accuracy. And then when we show the results in the top 4, like when you do your Google searches and you see many results, the results were as high as 88% accuracy. And all of a sudden then we had a possibility for a commercial project. So my challenge then was, well, what do? Do you take this and you turn it into an academic career or an industry career? Well, I chose an entrepreneurial career. And I wound up living in Japan for a number of years, where I started a business around monetizing some of this technology. And I would later even work for some companies that would monetize this technology. The first, of course, was a Mediasite corporation that was then acquired by some other corporations, really around this notion of how can you do image search, facial search, and do it in a way that is commercially viable for online search and online media. I would leave there, and I would actually work in an academic role. So just as we talked about earlier, I couldn't quite make up my mind if I wanted to be an academic or if I wanted to be in industry, so I toggled a bit. And I said, well, I really like starting companies, but about 8 years ago, I got an opportunity to start a university. I said, no, that's what I really want to do. I want to be George Washington Carver. I want to start my own, or Booker T. Washington. I want to create my own university. So again, this notion of unconventional thinking, thinking outside of the box, I would have never done this if I had a conventional upbringing. You know, if someone called me, the government of Trinidad called me and said, hey, we want you to start a university here, I would have said, no, thank you, I like the beach, but no thank you. But it was a lot easier to make that decision with my unconventional background. And there was a lot of great opportunity for innovation. I had a great time there. I started a media center there, focusing on imaging systems, virtual reality systems, even animation, and other forms of digital media. And true to my Tuskegee roots, I even worked on agricultural imaging, so things related to diseases of the black pod associated with cacao and other diseases. So I actually got to apply some of the things I did in imaging sciences and imaging recognition to agriculture and come full circle, again, with the connection back to my days at Tuskegee. So I really credit Tuskegee with giving me that foundation to think outside of the box, to be unconventional, but to also prepare me for a research and invention career in areas that I couldn't possibly imagine. So this concludes my story. I'd be happy to say more during the panel, and thank you very much.